Mr. Gupta, I'll come back to the question. When we talk about European protectionism, there's a tendency in American politics. You must have heard of Ram Murthy's speeches. He got more numbers than Trump in a couple of weeks. There is, I wouldn't say there's a wave of American nativism in the domestic politics, but that strand refuses to go away. And then we have G-20. President Biden is coming, is arriving. Friday he's going to have bilateral. So in that context, where the domestic politics of major important nations are behaving differently, could you just elucidate for us what is our challenge? Where should be our focus areas to really define our own agendas and imprint it?
Well, we are frankly not very much concerned with the domestic politics in the US. That is for the US to take care. But we have done very well in terms of forging very close relations with the United States.
Let me rephrase the question. If you recall, before Trump came in, for a year, Make America Great, there was a campaign. People underestimated it. But it started to reflect in his foreign policy. Then it became part of his manufacturing articulation, and it impacted everything.
Well, yes, there is a certain tendency for certain countries, and frankly, this tendency is spreading that they are thinking in terms of their country first. But ultimately, this is not something which is going to be very helpful or which is going to encourage creation of more global value, let's say global trade or global services or movement of finances and so on. So I think after a while we will realize that globalization helps and benefits everyone. The question is that the globalization may take a slightly different form now because of the changing politics. One example is the supply chains. The supply chains, the way they were situated earlier, they are changing. Now we are talking in terms of China plus one. Then we are talking in terms of supply chains moving to countries which are near major consumers or major centers of production, or which are where we can reduce the risk because of the abnormal behavior of certain countries like China, for instance. So yes, those kind of changes are going to take place. They are taking place. But globalization, I think wholesale we can't discard it. Globalization has been there for ages. It's going to continue. It will take different forms. But ultimately, it benefits everyone.
When you talk about benefiting everyone, it's like more than 70% of the global population, 85% of the GDP, I think 76% of the global trade. But then it doesn't entirely benefit everyone equally. It benefits some segments more and other segments less.
Well, yes, because the globalization is now being driven more and more by technology. So those who have joined the technology, who have got the technology, or who have got who are part of the digital economy, they are benefiting more. Those who are outside, those who are unable to join, they are benefiting less. So we have to acquire more skills. We have to go for more technologies. That is the bottom line. That is the underline.
Okay, let me go to Saibal Das Gupta on this. When we there are two questions here. One is Prime Minister and Jaishankar not only spoke about consumption and production, they also spoke about climate change. But I'll come to consumption and production part. Not only it's articulated that we need multiple centers of consumption, we also require multiple centers of production. That's one. So what do we mean when we talk about multiple centers of production in a world which is globalized? And in a globalized world, you have tension where there's a chip war here, and then everyone is afraid where the oil would pass through. That's one. And the second part in this segment of our conversation would be, what happens? How do we deal with climate change? How can G20 be the vanguard, a sort of a shepherd, sort of a light to tell the world, which we articulate in our domestic politics, one world, one family, that we are in it together. Saibal, can you just raise your hand? Saibal? Yeah. Saibal is there. Okay. Saibal?
Saibal is gone.
Oh, I think the Saibal is gone. So, Mr. Sajana, I would like you to, I thought Saibal is here with us. I would like you to take this question. How do we do that? If we are talking about multiple centers of consumption, how can multiple centers of production can be created?
Yeah, basically, I think what we have seen, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID, that there were so many items which are being produced in one country, and that country tried to weaponize its center of production, that is China. Because if it is concerning whether it is face masks or it is PPEs or it is ventilators, then it's only on your political positions that it was supplying. And I think that came as a rude shock as far as the world is concerned. Because in the process of globalization, they thought wherever efficiently some product can be manufactured, let us shift the production to that particular place. But then they realized that when there is this sort of weaponization, then we have multiple centers of production that need to be brought about. And I think that has started the whole process of China plus one. Because in all this, the issue of trust, the issue of reliability, the issue of credibility, that becomes very important. And that is what Prime Minister Modi has been projecting himself, that India is a trustworthy partner. So when we are talking about a China plus one, that means all the investment not going there. For the sometime it might be the most efficient place for production of goods, but it is not a trustworthy place, and that has been seen also as a result of its investments in the Belt and Road initiative. So I think here this realization has come to countries. So both as far as sensitive technologies are concerned, you don't want to share it with someone, with a country with which the trust deficit is there. So it is in that context that the issue of trust in the G20 context has also become very relevant and important.
So absolutely, I'll come to you. But there's also one more thing. When we talk about G20, I think everyone understands that the biggest threat is climate change. It's not discriminating anyone. You look at the fires in the Greece. You look at the Californian flooding. You look at what's happening in India in context of the deluge which Uttarakhand, which Himachal Pradesh has witnessed. People have forgotten about the Kashmir flooding. But the fact of the matter is that the world needs to be prepared. Do you think that the G20 is the territory which Prime Minister can pilot to actually throw the agenda of what we call a common future, one planet?
I think there are three aspects here. The first is that India has been taking a lead in green energy, in green hydrogen, investing money, but it is not getting the foreigners to invest the pledges that were made before in G20. So the agenda is that India wants that money so that India can implement a climate change agenda. The second thing is, the interesting thing is that in the American elections, there is a huge debate now with leading Republican contenders saying that they do not believe in climate change. So it will be very interesting.
Absolutely.
It will be very interesting to see how this debate pans out, because suddenly there is a new player on the block which just denies climate change. And thirdly, to my mind, as a G20 forum sort of institutionalizes this demand from the global south for funding, can the north walk the talk? Will money be available? Because, we need, bear in mind, this is not cheap. $20 billion a year just for India are needed for changing from fossil fuel to new fuel. So, the remote point of this G20 is, will they walk the talk, and will money come on the table?